What's up, friends? Welcome to the Real Estate Growth Solutions podcast. Courtney Atkinson here with my good friend Ryan Weary. And today we're going to be telling you some strategies that we've used to successfully get buyers and sellers off the fence into action. And Ryan, I don't know about you, but one of the hardest things for me coming up in real estate was learning to be influential, like what is it that I can do to affect an outcome for a family that I know that they want, but for whatever reason, they have some reservations around. And I have to tell you, man, early on, my strategy was bulldoze. Man, I just push, 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 push. And you know how that works, right? Not that well. So, what about you, Ryan? Like, I know that you're brilliant at this, but tell me, like, just your philosophy on kind of like how you came to this point.
Yeah, well, and it's very front of mind for me right now, and that's why I wanted to kind of talk about this topic today because, and I'm not kidding, I've had more conversations with people worried about getting to market because they're worried about being homeless with low inventory.
Yeah.
I've had more conversations in the past 6 months than in the past 6 years of being in this business. And I think a lot of agents will just let the market dictate whether a seller comes into or out of the market instead of like just being aware, like, hey, there might be more strategies out there that we can use and kind of arm our toolkit to where at least we can get a conversation further down the road with clients. Ultimately, it's going to be up to them. But I think with a few strategies that we're going to cover off today, at least agents will have a better understanding of how to have those conversations and what to say during them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. I think philosophically, one of the things that I want to share with all of our viewers today is that people don't do what you tell them to do. They do what they feel is right. And if you're the kind of person that's too pushy, sometimes feeling like the right thing is just doing whatever it is that's opposite what you've just said, right? It's like the anti-influencer who's more of a bully, and that can work on some people, and maybe it is in their best interest. But at the end of the day, influence is really about helping people see the opportunities that they have before them, understanding the variables associated with the different opportunities, and helping them make an educated choice that's going to best suit their needs. And the thing that we know, Ryan, is that like it's not easy to do that. Okay. Like you've got to be competent, you've got to be intelligent, you've got to know the roadmaps, right? You have to know your client, and then you have to be able to oscillate between logic and emotion and know when to use what strategy. I mean, there's a lot to it. And so from a simple standpoint, Ryan, like if you had to give away like one or two easy tips that have enabled you to get people off the fence and to influence them to do things that you know are in the best interest, is there one or two things that you've just found like real simply like that a person could apply without having to get too complicated?
Yeah, a few things right off the top of my head, and this is going to sound very elementary, but it's insanely important, and it's where a lot of agents will, in my opinion, just not do this, and that's just getting in person in the office early in that relationship, right? And I get it, we all get busy, our schedules are all over the place, but I want us to think about, hey, with this relationship that we have, let's use a buyer for example. If I front load my time with them and I take the extra 40 minutes and meet with them at the office to build some rapport, to explain and talk about the market, to plant some seeds on what challenges we're likely going to face, that actually shortens my global time with that client, right? Instead of just being a door opener, saying, yeah, I'll meet you at that property at that time. We think about how there's different ways of doing this business, okay? And I honestly believe that the majority of agents are doing it the wrong way just because that's how it's been done for so long. And so I think the needs assessment is very important for buyers and especially for sellers. And getting that to be in person in a formal setting. Maybe it's at a Starbucks. If you don't have an office, it's at a Starbucks, it's at a public location. I use a Tim Hortons by my house all the time. Like this nice little fireside corner. I sit down with buyers and it gives them an opportunity to not only get to know you, but also for you to start providing value because there's not a lot of other agents that are going to be doing that. So,
That's so right. And it's funny, we've talked about this so much, haven't we, Ryan, about how critical it is to front load, just in general terms, like just front load your effort, your energy in the client relationship, right? And what we've said so many times before is if you've got a bulletproof process And really what I mean by bulletproof process is just a process that you use all of the time with the same scripts, the same language, the same questions at the same juncture in the relationship. You can mitigate so much risk down the road, right? And I think what happens to a lot of people, right, is that, the agent's so excited to have the opportunity to do business, they're forgetting the fact that like there's risk to be mitigated. So they jump through all the hoops, they invest all this time and energy doing all this stuff for the client, only to realize, oh yeah, they're not going to do business at all. When if we had just approached it more differently, like smoother, more eloquently in a more organized fashion, front loading the information, like you've said, like a lot of that anxiety can dissipate. Whereas I think what happens with so many agents, right, is they're like, yeah, you want to sell, let's go. And then boom, they rush and then people freak out, right? And then they ghost you and you can't get a hold of them again. You're like, man, what happened? Like, damn clients, everybody's so flaky now. And it's like, no, 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 like your process sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Evaluate your process. Ask yourself, why is it that that's happening? The reason it's happening to a lot of folks is because they create too much excitement and then there's too much fear and people freak out and they just back away. So if you're the kind of person who's prepared to have difficult conversations with a client at the beginning, recognizing what's likely coming up down the road, you can mitigate that risk before they get there. And so you're in this position where you're maintaining a very even keel of people's emotions. They're saying yes more. They're understanding the risks and challenges. You're providing those potential outcomes and your solutions for them in advance of them ever becoming an issue. And so this like big well of emotion doesn't really come up. I mean, it can. I'm not saying it won't, but just in general terms, it comes up a lot less. Would you agree with that, Ryan?
100%. And it's what we've talked about a lot in these podcasts is, treating this industry like a craft. And I always look at, a professional athlete, say a hockey player, for example, or, I'm a golfer, so I look at golfers and like they have a process for their game day. Like they could tell you exactly how many minutes they show up before their tee time or how many hours they show up before the puck drop. And I bet you, to the minute, they could tell you what they're doing. And that's a process. And what's so awesome about having a process in real estate is that we can change it and tweak it and add things and subtract things as we go. But if I'm in a one-on-one coaching session with an agent and they're struggling about conversion, whether it be from appointment to closing or getting a listing or, getting buyers a transaction fee, I ask them, well, what's your process? Walk me through that. And a lot
Mhm.
of times eyes will gloss over that way. Like, what do you mean? Usually the process gets dictated by the client as opposed to the agent dictating that process and having a very systematic way because there is freedom in that. It's not like we become robots. It's like, no, I can stack clients and have the ability to take on a lot of transactions if I have a process.
Yeah. So Ryan, let's present the scenario now where, one of the many folks that are here today is in a deal. Okay. They don't have a great process, but now they're working on getting a process in place so that next time this doesn't happen again. And they've got, let's just say, a client on the fence. Okay, let's keep it real generic before we get into the specifics of buyers and sellers. What's
Sure.
a strategy that you've used to get a buyer or a seller off the fence into some sort of action, or at least more amenable to proceeding? Do you have a strategy that you could share?
I would say, for me personally, I always try to get kind of one level up of whatever their comfortable method of communication is. So, for example, if I've just been texting them a lot, I'm gonna be on the phone with them. If it's
Mhm.
an older couple, maybe for example, older demographic, they like phone call, I'm gonna move to in person. So I always try to level one more up because they're gonna know it's a different type of conversation. So that's step one. But then step two is just asking them about that specific thing that they may be hesitating on and saying and prefacing that question with, tell me more about why you're hesitant to do blank,
Mhm.
right? Tell
Yeah.
me more or walk me through. The way we preface questions is incredibly important. And if you just start using tell me more, walk me through, help me understand why, then
Mhm.
they're going to start to talk about the real reasons. And a lot of times, Court, that main objection is way different than what they were telling me before, but it's
It
in a
is.
different communication setting. And you've
Mhm.
asked them to explain to you, the agent, what's holding them back from doing whatever the case is, depending on the situation.
I love that because what we're doing here, okay, like this is essentially objection handling, okay, in a way, it's objection handling, and you're forcing someone forcing might be a strong word, but we're asking someone to justify their hesitation to us, right? Like explain it to us, and a lot of times when you start talking about the monster in your closet, it doesn't seem so scary. Really, what it comes down to is the fact that, maybe you ate something before bed that's keeping you awake. And that's the real issue. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I love that, Ryan, the way that you're opening that up. And it reminds me of something else that I found very helpful as well. And I think it in a way underpins some of what you've just said. And it took me a long time to get comfortable with this, man. I I don't know what it was. It might have been a maturity thing. It might have just been seeing the mistake happen so many times that I just got tired of seeing it. But I remember being the kind of person that just got uncomfortable around emotional stuff, right? Like somebody died. I was like, oh man, like, or somebody's going through a divorce, like, okay, hope they're okay, but I'm not going to say anything about that. Um, Here's the thing that I learned, and it's that our business is happening in large part due to a lot of these emotional things that are happening in people's lives. And if I plan on being good at it, I better be good at talking about these emotional things. Okay. Like, and I don't mean like good, I mean like completely unfazed, not unfazed in an uncaring way, unfazed in the way that I can alternate the type of conversation that I'm having depending on the information that's presented to me. So the way that I processed that in my mind, and the point that I wanted to share with our viewers today, Ryan, was, when I see, feel, or hear an emotion, I want to speak to that emotion. Like if I can clearly see that this person is freaked out, if I can clearly see that this person is angry, if I can clearly see that this person is irritated and frustrated, I'm going to speak to that. I'm not going to pretend like I didn't just see someone lose their mind. Okay. Like that's important. Okay. And I'm going to have a really hard time moving this process forward, getting this person off the fence, unless I can understand what they're experiencing right now and potentially build a road that's going to help them through that. And so let's use the example. We've written an offer, and maybe the listing agent's not getting back to us in a timely fashion. It's in competition, and my buyer's angry and frustrated, and maybe already didn't like that agent because they worked with them before. You know how these things sometimes go, right? I have two options. One, I can be like, yeah, worst agent ever. I can't believe that they would do this to us. Like, how disrespectful. And then, like, the tornado is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Like, that's what most people will do, right? Instead, what I would do now is I would just say to the person, you know what? That does feel really frustrating. I can see that you're frustrated. Tell me more about that. What's frustrating about this to you? And just help them unpack it, right?
Mhm.
And generally, what it comes down to is like, I feel uncared for. I feel disrespected. I'm scared that I'm not going to get this house. I'm worried that my kid won't get to have that bedroom. Like, this is the issue. Like, let's talk about that. Like, it's not the agent, okay? It's not communication. It's like fear, generally speaking. And when I can bring somebody down to that level, we can start talking about real solutions, right? And a lot of times, if I can be the person that can do that with this client of mine, I can also be the person to do that with that agent. And I have a much better chance of getting everybody together too, don't I? When I'm not like the guy that's like stirring that pot up, right?
Yeah, 100%. And back to my earlier point about wanting to do numerous transactions at once, you just simply can't do it at a high level if you are the person that fuels that tornado with all parties that you're engaging with, right? And in order to do a decent number of level of business, and this is a huge learning curve for agents that maybe cap out at about that 20 deal per year and want to double it to 35, 40, 45 deals, it's being able to manage emotions not only within yourself, but
Mm.
being able to manage the emotions with all the parties involved in all the deals. Sometimes it's a seller, sometimes it's a property inspector, sometimes it's a lender, sometimes there's tons of people involved in this situation. We need to kind of be that sounding piece and that person that puts all the pieces of the puzzle together. And that's a lot easier to do when you're basically diffusing those bombs that are coming up, right? So
Yeah,
and
that's really
and
good.
and you guys can build out scripts to help you just by seeing an emotion, speaking an emotion, prefacing, hey, I sense some frustration. Tell me more about where that's coming from. Tell me more about your biggest fears right now about
Yeah.
listing your house, right?
Like,
So
and
it's
doesn't it sound like a counselor's job too? Like those questions, don't they just sound like somebody that you'd be paying to like walk you through some crisis in your life?
yeah. Yeah, and that's where a lot of new agents always ask, like, hey, what should I say here? And I'm like, well, we need to teach you how to fish. We need to teach you, hey, within this script, here's the actual parts of it. You're acknowledging an emotion, you're prefacing it, and then you're asking them to tell you more about this, right? So, like, once you learn the format of these scripts, it becomes a lot easier to think on your feet. And then obviously that higher end ninja skill is like to do it in person, like you said, where on the spot you have enough guts to have those conversations. And I think when you get to the other side of those tough conversations, the person that you've had that conversation with will respect you more because you're leading it to a positive end as opposed to escalating everything. And those escalation conversations, they usually don't end well, right?
Yeah. There's something else that's worth mentioning here, I think, as well. And it's, maybe obvious to some of our viewers today, but I want to highlight it just so that it's clear to everyone else. You know, it's really, really, really common for us to want to build community around negativity. Okay, that's just a common human thing, and we don't need to unpack why that is, but it's just a common thing. And so I think a lot of us have been brought up, Ryan, to like see an irritation, to see frustration, to see anger, and then immediately want to get on the team of that person because, we love them, we care for them, we want to support them, right? And I'm just here to tell you that that's a fast track to a heart attack or stress or not being able to double your business from 20 to 40 or 40 to 80 deals a year because you'll just be too damn angry. Like you'll be wound up so much that you won't be able to see the forest for the trees. And what I had to learn how to do that really, really made the biggest difference for me in navigating that, instead of getting sucked in, I would just ask questions and explore it. Okay. And so it might sound strange to folks listening, Ryan, but the real truth is that the better I got at asking questions, the better my business got. Like I just had to realize that it wasn't my job to always have answers and to always jump onto a bandwagon. My job was to take a step back, where possible, get into this third person perspective and think like what question would move this down the road a little ways? Like, how can I be a facilitator by asking a question right now? And I'll tell you, it's a hard skill, it's a learned skill, and you got to practice it and you're going to suck at it for a while. But once you master that, as you've said, Ryan, you really have this ability to help people feel safe, cared for, and comfortable. And a lot of times you'll get to the bottom of the real issue, right? Which is I'm scared, I'm concerned, I'm worried, all those things.
Yeah, so true. An example that I just went through in my own life, different industry, but we're getting into September now, end of golf season for me, and there's some things that I would like kind of a fresh opinion on. So long story short, I got connected with a golf instructor from Texas through a really good known referral, if you will.
Mhm.
And so I've been talking to this instructor back and forth, and Courtney, he's asked me, and I have it in text. He's asked me 15 questions without giving me one thing to work on, looking at my swing, nothing. So like that's golf. That means nothing, right? And now we as agents, we're about to help someone facilitate buying or selling five, six, $700,000, $1 million asset. And we feel bad about meeting them for coffee before just to ask them a little bit more questions so that we can help understand how to best serve them. And oh,
Yeah.
by the way, guys, that's the script you use to go from call to appointment. I'd like to meet with you, ask you a little bit more questions, and figure out how I can best serve you. No
Yeah.
one's going to say no to that. Because at the end of the day, guys, we're trying to facilitate a journey that's as easy as possible for that buyer and seller to go through. And when you master that, you don't have to ask for a review, you get one. You don't have to ask for referrals, they're going to sing your praises forever, right? So that's what's at the end of this. And the whole concept of this is to make it easier for not only the client, but if it's easier for your client, it's easier for you too.
Way easier. You know, getting a little bit more into the weeds here, just so that we can give our friends today some takeaways, Ryan. I wanted to share a couple ideas. And listen, I know that no matter the training, no matter what, there's going to be situations where there's people on the fence and they're just seemingly stuck. We've all had it, okay? Despite your best efforts. I mean, you can have all the best scripts and role play and process, and sometimes there's just something, right? And so one of the things that's worked really well for me, Ryan, is to suggest to that person, the person that's really got their heels dug in, first thing I want to do, like first step in this process, is acknowledge that they're walking away. Okay. I'm not hanging on to it. I'm just gonna, in my mind, I'm letting it go. Like, and by the way, that's a pretty good strategy for sales, anyways. The less you cling to things, the more they come to you, right? And so if this person has said, you know what, we're waiting a year to buy, this market's crazy. I don't like the interest rates. I don't like the rush, all these things, they're going to wait. So my conversation to them using Ryan's strategy, right? So if this has been by text or email, we're leveling it up or going to an in-person, right? But here's what I'll say. If it's with Ryan, I'll say, hey, Ryan, do you know what? I can appreciate this being frustrating for you, and I respect your decision to wait until next year. So let's do this. I've got some time tomorrow afternoon at 3, the following day at 5. I'd just like to recap and wind this up so that I have a better understanding of why this matters to you and what we can do to make sure that it's a great experience for you next year. And if there's things that I need to be doing in the near term, let's just go ahead and build a roadmap for that. Which one of those 2 times works best for you, Ryan? So it's like
Love that.
this super low pressure way for us to get some face time. Okay. And what do you think I'm doing in that meeting? I'm doing another needs assessment, right? I'm rediscovering the stuff that maybe they haven't told me before, and maybe, and I'm not saying guaranteed, but maybe reinvigorating the entire process. So long as all of my decision makers are there, I've got a shot at reinvigorating the process and helping mitigate some of the fears and concerns that they've got. And so in order for that to work in my experience, Ryan, I really have to let them feel confident that I'm letting them go. And I'm not putting a hard pitch on them. It's not about that at all. But through the questions, right, through the requalification about next year, I'll ask things like, well, what's important about next June? Well, interest rates are going to be better. Are they? What if they're not? Would you rather have a house now, or does it matter that much? What happens if prices are 10% higher next year and interest rates are a little bit lower and you can afford less house next year? Does that matter to you, or would that not be a concern to you? Like, you see
Mhm.
what we're doing here, right? We're just asking them questions that will give them the opportunity to objectively make a wise choice for whatever they're feeling. That'll give me more information, and I'll be able to do a better job for them next year if that's when the time comes. Or maybe I get the shot to do it now because of something that came up in that conversation. But if I didn't have it, hey, it's anybody's game. Maybe they're buying a house with another realtor in January for all I know, right?
Yeah, no, there's so much good stuff in there, Courtney, and when you actually get face to face with folks and you kind of you bring that anxiety level, or what I like to call kind of the sales resistance, when you bring it down to a point like, hey, I just want to wind this up to make sure I can serve you best whenever that time is, then those people are going to come to that appointment or that meeting a lot less stressed too, right?
Mhm.
And I've had 2 recent clients, like literally in the last month, where usually, especially if you're a newer agent, and in these 2 situations, these relationships started out by on the buying end of things. Okay.
Mhm.
Where I met the one in an open house, the other one was just a lead that I ended up having a needs assessment with, both of which needed to sell a house. Okay. These situations are exactly the same. And in a seller's market, one of the biggest fears that people have is that, yeah, put a for sale sign up in their yard. It's going to sell right away. And then what? Well, they're going to be homeless, right?
Mhm.
But in both situations, Courtney, no other agents, and remember, this one person was out open housing, so they've been in front of other agents. No other agent talked to them about a seller's condition and how we can 100% guarantee that being homeless is just, it's off the table,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? But a lot of agents won't facilitate that environment to where someone's going to listen to them, because when you start talking about sellers conditions, bridge financing, how the whole process works, it can become very overwhelming, and they just always worry about that main fear of being homeless. But
That's
when you can actually sit them down and be like, hey, a lot of folks that I've worked with lately have had that same fear. This is how we've 100% mitigated that fear. Do you have any other objections of moving forward now?
yeah.
Right? You're totally taking that objection off the table. You're getting a listing, you're putting it on market, and by the way, guys, when that happens, a lot of times the worry about being homeless goes away when they get a sack of money via an offer that they couldn't refuse, right?
Right.
So now in this one case, they do legitimately, they can't risk being homeless, and that's totally fine. So put the property on the market, put a seller's condition in, and we're looking for a house. At least I've gotten them down the road of making this happen for them, right?
Ryan, one of the things that I want to highlight here for our viewers today, though, is that that's because of your process, right? Like, you have the process of going through a needs assessment, early stages, asking all of these questions, and proactively mitigating this risk in advance of it becoming a reality, right? And what so many agents want to do is just move to the point where they've got the contract, the listing, and everything in the ground forgetting the fact that with that all comes so much stress, worry, and fear that people ball up and leave. They just walk away, right? And so my belief is that the reason why that's happening so smoothly for you is because you learned about this, the fear, you addressed it, you leaned into it, you provided a couple good solutions, and now they're feeling safe and cared for. I'd be willing to bet that other agents also know about the seller's condition. It's just that they're not talking about it at the right time. They're not talking about it proactively. They're talking about it reactively. It's kind of like with a child, you know, once you've got a child that's completely wound up and in a fit and screaming in their room and slamming the door, like you're gonna have to give that kid a couple minutes before you go in and have a chat, right? But you may have, you know, mitigated that by feeding the kid, for example, getting it a better sleep the night before, and maybe not feeding it red food dye. I say it, I can do that. I got two kids, so I kind of know some of these things. Oh,
It's so
but you get
true
the
though.
point, right? Like it's just that proactive stuff that you got to do to make sure that you're having a good day with kids. Same with buyers and sellers, right?
And you can use a lot of the same stuff, guys, in your messaging to your audience, whether it's social media posts, whether it's, you're doing videos and boosting it to a neighborhood, whether you're door knocking, and just speak to kind of the general, I would say, pain points that consumers are having right now. And I
Mhm.
love doing that on my social media, is just speaking to like, hey, here's a lot of the situations I've seen come up in this market. Here's how we've mitigated them with clients in the past to give them basically access to move forward. And once people start to hear that, they're naturally going to reach out to the person they heard it from, right? Like none of this stuff is rocket science, but for whatever reason, agents just want to make it so easy and just get a listing and sell that listing and move on. It's like, no, sometimes you have to kind of connect the dots and be like, hey, for this specific person, what's their main fears? How can you mitigate that down to zero and allow them to move to market? Because there is a very, very clear reason why 80% or sorry, 20% of agents do 80% of the business, right? And it is a lot to do with problem solving.
Oh, for sure. And being proactive and having a plan, right? You know, just for fun, Ryan, what I'm doing right now, I'm going to go to Chat GPT, okay? And I'm going to type in, tell me the top 5 fears that home buyers and home sellers are faced with in North America right now. So the reason I'm doing this, Ryan, of course, is because I love your social media strategy. You're absolutely right that speaking to people about their fears is a wise thing to do. Well, listen, here we go. Number one, economic uncertainty and interest rates, market volatility, affordability issues, home condition and disclosure, transaction complexity and delays. Okay, now my next one. Um, give me 5 social media topics that have the greatest chance of going viral. Give me the hook to start these videos with. Give me a 5 point, what would you say, like give me 5 talking points.
Yep.
Give me 5 talking points for each one. Give me a call to action for each one as well. And while you're at it, provide me with the 5 best hashtags. Boom.
Yeah. I,
Okay.
so just like before, chat came along, agents would have the fear of, or the objection of being like, hey, I don't know what to post. That doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't. That's just a flat out
Okay.
excuse to just be lazy. Because
Yeah.
what Courtney just did there took them, I don't know, 40 seconds, and you have enough social media content for probably a month there.
I'm looking at some really good content here. Um, let's see. Yeah, secrets to winning a bidding war in a hot market. Hook. Lost out on your dream home in a bidding war. Next time you'll come prepared. Here's how. Talking points. Understanding the dynamics of a bidding war. Strategies to make your offer stand out. The importance of pre-approval and proof of funds. How to leverage escalation clauses wisely and emotional appeals to sellers. Right? Personal letter, dude. Like, it's like we're probably going to be unemployed here soon, Ryan.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right?
Uh, it's so good because like you know, when I hear that, my mind goes spinning into other kind of things that you could do, whether it's an email campaign or whether it's, you know, just reaching out to past clients, right? Like
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be rocket science, but there has to be some proactive effort, there has to be some proactive thought. And a lot of times it's just us putting ourselves in the consumer's shoes. And what I mean by that is specific situations. Like, hey, if I was my client right now, they have 3 kids, they live in a 3-bedroom house, like how would I be feeling that my house isn't selling? Right? Well, probably I'd be stressed out, right? I'd be running hot, right? And so like just being aware of what your clients are going through or what maybe a lead is going through that you can then just kind of nudge them, hit a base hit, get them down to that next step, get them in person, get them under contract, right? Start
Yep.
working with them and just
Mhm.
kind of shuffling the goalposts down the road, if you will, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and one more thing I think before, we close out here, Ryan, that I want to share with our viewers today. And I see this happen quite a bit, particularly with newer agents, but it's not exclusive to newer agents. But I do see with some consistency agents trying to move clients too far too fast. And so, for example, right, like on the phone call, on an initial phone call with a lead, for example, like talking about representation, or moving all the way through to pricing or something like just way, 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 way far down the road, rather than providing some like generic, general, relevant value to the conversation and then moving to an appointment, maybe just for another phone call, right? Or an in-person, but to then level up the value being provided. Or, you've got a client that's sitting on the fence, for example, and they're concerned about, take the example of being homeless. Going to the example of like, okay, well, let's just get your house for sale. I promise you it'll be fine. You got to trust me. It's like, no, like that's totally not going to work. Okay. Like they've already told you that they don't trust you essentially because they're not doing it. And just like saying it again isn't going to help me. You can put all the different words around it you want. Like a different approach is necessary. And so, like, what's an interim step that I can take that's going to move us down the road a little ways, right? Something like, you know what? That sounds like a reasonable fear. I can't say that I'd love being homeless with my 3 kids. That sounds pretty brutal. But listen, here's the truth is that we have yet to have a family go homeless. But why don't we sit down together and just spend 20 minutes talking about the strategies that we've used to make sure that that doesn't happen? I'll bring you a coffee. I've got some time tomorrow afternoon at 3. I could swing by after supper too. Which one of those 2 times is best for you?
You're
Like,
just decreasing the sales resistance through and through. You're acknowledging, you're saying like, hey, we've done this a lot before. Why don't we do this, right?
yeah. And I like to attach a time commitment to it as well, because I think sometimes people feel like the agent's going to come over to their house and sit there for an hour and a half and they don't want that. I'm like, no, like I can literally cover this in 20 minutes. Like,
Yeah.
and I'll do my best to be in and out. I mean, if they're keeping me, that's fine. But I'll say, that's been 20 minutes, guys. You still want me to stay? I promise you I wouldn't be here longer than that. Like I'll say that in the meeting, right? Like I want them to know that I value them and I value their time. Like it's just these little things, right? And I can move them further down the road when they see that I honor their time. Like I'm here to provide value and I'm not here to rush them and I'm not here to do too much at once, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a great place to wind up. There's a ton of scripts, ton of value there. Hopefully you guys can implement this, none of which is rocket science. If I can do this, if Courtney can do this, anyone can do this. So
True
uh,
story.
so
Yeah.
yeah, you guys, if you want more content like this, we're doing these weekly. Check out our YouTube page, Real Estate Growth Community on Facebook. And yeah, any closing thoughts there, Court?
No, reach out if there's a way that we can be of service to you. If you have topics that you would like us to cover, if gosh, whatever is going on in your business, I can promise you this. If we haven't been through it, we've got some information that'll lean into it a little bit. And hey, we can always do some research for you as well. We've got great connections. So we'd love to be of service. Thanks for being here today, friends. So great to connect. We'll catch you next time.
See you guys.